is the Orange Zone, sponsored by Apex Entertainment.
What's up, everyone? Welcome into another episode of the Orange Zone podcast, sponsored by Apex Entertainment. That's Ashley Wenskoski. I'm Samantha Croston. Thanks so much for joining us. We are joining you during the Syracuse football bye week. They are coming off of back-to-back losses for the first time in the Fran Brown era. Ashley, how are we doing?
Yes, it feels like this was... Boy, did Syracuse football need a break. Actually, that's all I have to say. It was sort of the bye week that comes at the perfect time. You said it. This is the first time under Fran Brown that they've lost back-to-back games. There is a glaring problem at the quarterback position, which we are going to discuss. But all of that culminates in the fact that I am very happy that they get 2 weeks to kind of hit a restart button. And
you don't normally say that with Syracuse football. As we know, coming out of the bye, past few years has been tough for them. However, the last time out, October 4th, Syracuse was at SMU. They lost 31-18. Even that final score, quite honestly, is not indicative of Syracuse's performance. It was damn near a blowout, is really what it was.
They really found all of their offense in garbage time. We can say that.
And it's okay to say that.
Yeah.
There were, of course, some problems. But really, the big issue the past few weeks has been the offense. And there's a couple reasons for that. But Syracuse has a quarterback problem.
Yeah, the quarterback problem is coming to a head probably sooner than it should, right? This is like such a tough situation because I think that in a normal world where Rickie Collins maybe starts the season as the starter, everybody knows you get more than 2 games to judge a guy, right? But the unfortunate truth and the harsh reality for Rickie and for the rest of the team is Rickie came in here in week 5. We saw a good Steve Angeli to start the year. We saw the path that Syracuse have been on if Steve Angeli did not have that season-ending Achilles injury. Rickie Collins thrown into the fire, and when you get thrown into the fire, you just don't get the patience and the leash that you may have if you started the season as the starter. It sucks. It's not really fair to Rickie, but it's just the truth.
When you get thrown into the fire, sometimes you get burned.
Yeah.
And that's what's been happening the past 2 games. Rickie Collins, as far as the issues that we're seeing, I think top of mind is an accuracy issue. We're seeing that there are wide receivers who are open. Several times in that game against SMU, there were wide receivers that were wide open downfield. And when Monroe comes back next week, we'll get his opinion on this. But really, the general discussion and consensus is that these are some technical issues. He's looking at the first read, and defenders are saying in the post-game press conference, especially after the Duke game, we're reading his eyes. We know where the ball is going. But then on top of that, the ball's not going to the right place either. Have to think there's some frustration there. I will say, I felt like you saw Willis getting a little frustrated. You saw the sideline getting heated as all hell. There's issues right now, and I can't imagine that for Rickie Collins, knowing that there's anger surrounding this is really any help.
No, I mean, there's sort of, it's kind of a whole culmination of things, right? Like you said, there is an accuracy problem. There's almost a hesitancy problem, but then there's a decision-making problem. Sometimes he does make a decision quickly and it's just the wrong one. Like you said, defenders are out there saying that they can read his eyes. I mean, the commentator on this SMU game, the broadcaster said that you could kind of tell where Rickie was throwing the ball. I mean, he's shown no ability to look off the safety and go through any of his reads. He's shown no ability to get into the second, third read, find an open receiver that maybe wasn't the play call. That's just the bottom line. Unfortunately, he doesn't really have time to work out those kinks. I mean, he does because it's a bye week and you can practice all you want. But like Fran Brown's been saying it, and it's true, this is a guy who, the harsh reality is he hasn't been starting football games in 3 years since he was in high school. Yes, he was at LSU. Yes, he sat behind Jaden Daniels and Garrett Nussmeier. Yes, he watched Steve Angeli for a few games this year. But if you can't go out there and put, yourself in that position to succeed, it doesn't really matter.
You know what it's felt like? It feels like, how when you're watching someone do their craft and they just make it look so easy, like a comedian.
Yeah.
And you're seeing all the clips on Instagram and everyone's laughing at the jokes and it's so funny. And then you see someone go up there and just bomb a joke and no one laughs. And you're like, wait,
no one laughs.
That's actually really hard. And you have to be able to come up with a good joke. That's how I felt watching him play quarterback the past 2 weeks. It's like, wait, there's a lot of things about the quarterback position that I think a lot of other quarterbacks at the NFL level, at the collegiate level, are making look like are really simple, but in fact, they're not. It's a decision, a choice to decide, instead of even going to the first read or the second read, I'm just going to do my own thing. Like, you have to, I think, as a quarterback, I'm saying this as someone who has never played quarterback but has watched quite a bit of football, you have to be able to make a decision and make a decision fast. That's something that I think Kyle McCord was very good at.
Yeah.
Very decisive. And with Steve Angeli, it felt the same way. Rickie Collins seems a little confused, a little lost, and those seconds that he's spending trying to make a decision are hurting him. Those seconds that he's spending looking for the first read when it's not there are hurting the team. And quite honestly, 2 games in, you truly have gone from a Clemson win where you thought somehow this team could get to 7 or maybe even 8 wins remarkably, to a team that is not even going to go bowling. And that's a hard pill to swallow for the fans, and I do understand why.
Well, I think the issue with Collins is, like, we're sitting here and we're saying all this stuff, and Fran Brown continues to stay behind him, which, again, it's only been a couple of weeks. What do you expect Fran to do? What other option does he have at this point? You know, he came out after the SMU game and said it's like he's a freshman about Collins because he hasn't played since high school. But my counter to that is, well, you could say the same about Steve Angeli. Now, Steve Angeli got limited time at Notre Dame. He played more than Collins. He was obviously in some higher stakes situations, but he wasn't the starter either. Steve Angeli didn't have a team that he could call his own and an offense that he ran for a few years either. And he obviously stepped into that role a lot more seamlessly. I think you can just tell if a guy has a command of an offense. Angeli showed flashes against Tennessee and then developed it over a few games. Collins hasn't even showed flashes. And I think that's where he showed flashes of talent. He's shown flashes of, how he can throw the ball, how he can move, but he hasn't shown flashes of having that commanding quarterback decisive presence. And that's where I think fans are struggling, right? Because it's like Syracuse came out and lost to Tennessee, but everybody was like, all right, there's stuff to build on there for Angeli. And then you saw it build. We've seen no building in 2 games.
We've seen no building. And again, like you said, 2 games is not a lot of time to be able to build. And I know on this podcast previously, we have said that we felt like, or at least I have said this, but I thought that you agreed that with Rickie Collins, he had more, or at least a lot of raw talent when it came to, his throwing ability and his ability to move. And to your point, I actually do think we've seen flashes of that. Sometimes the ball's not on target, but I'm like, wow, that was a well-thrown ball.
Yeah.
I still honestly believe what I said, that with some training, with some practice, he really could maybe be a good to great quarterback. But nobody, the fans, the coaches, the other players on the team, are really interested in finding that out. The problem is nobody in the Syracuse community feels like playing a long game right now.
No.
And that's kind of the situation that you're in. So what do? You said there are not a lot of options. The only other option, let's be fair.
Yeah.
The only other option is if Rickie Collins is playing like a freshman anyway, then why not throw in a freshman? And that's the discussion that people are having. They liked Luke Carney. He's the freshman from Texas. Do you do it? Do you not do it? I don't know.
I mean, it's certainly so for the record, I do not think Fran Brown is going to do it headed into the Pitt game. I do not think Luke Carney is out there starting at quarterback because Fran Brown is faced right now with a juncture that he hasn't had to face yet as a head coach. Fran Brown he has a problem. Everybody knows he has a problem. And he doesn't have a concrete answer. Every other time with Fran, when he had a problem, there's been a concrete answer that Fran said was the answer and then that panned out as the answer. Unfortunately, he doesn't have that at this time. Even if you throw Carney in there, you're taking a risk. And then at that point, you can't really take it back. If you make Luke Carney the starter against Pittsburgh and into UNC and beyond, I mean, there's, 5-6 games left to play? You can't really go back and then go back to Collins and say, all right, you're back because, let's be fair, Collins has been through the ringer at this point too. Comes in, you sort of assume he's the starter in the offseason. Angeli comes in, he loses the job. Now he gets the job. Now nobody's happy. If he swaps him out, it's like you can only go back to the well so many times, I guess is what I'm trying to say. If Fran Brown were to switch out Collins for Luke Carney, he knows that that's sort of a decision you can't take back. He knows it's a decision that may just simply not pan out. But the other side of that is, and I completely agree with fans that are feeling this way, it's like you don't just want to flush the second half of the season.
Right.
The unfortunate reality that we're staring down is Syracuse football is starting to lose people. You've had 2 games now that were just not competitive. Not in it, not competitive. Nobody has an answer. And that's a feeling that people haven't felt since Dino Babers. And now it's being resurfaced. And that
hurts.
That's a tough pill to swallow.
That hurts to hear because it's so true. Last year, every single game we sat down at this table and had something to say. Even if it was a loss, it was competitive. I mean, it was a blowout. I understand 31-18 doesn't feel like a blowout, but if you were there and you watched that game start to finish the way I did, that was not a fun watch. I was only watching that because it's my job to watch that. I was not interested in watching that entire game. And I think fans are feeling the same way. The other side with the Luke Carney thing is, you know, are you going to just let the second half of the year slip? Because let's just say that they stick with him against Pittsburgh and the exact same thing or something similar happens. Rickie Collins reads haven't improved. They get a touchdown when it matters and then find their rhythm at the end of the fourth quarter. Now what? Now you're going to switch them out at that point and Luke Carney is going to have his first start on the road at number 13 Georgia Tech? No. And now you're in a hole even until that point. And then what? It's like, are you going to wait until you're not bowl eligible and the year sort of is and feels like a wash and then you're going to try and develop the freshman? I don't know, man. I don't know what Luke Carney has to offer. That's why it's hard for me to make this decision. But if he has something even close to what Collins has, a part of me honestly thinks you should take a flyer on it because Collins is not improving. And the other thing is, for anyone who's even worried about, you know, I mean, Collins has been through the ringer. I'm just saying, like, as a person, that's a hard situation. But who's to say that Collins is going to stick around next year anyway? You know, Angeli, if he comes back, is going to be the starter. Collins is going to know that. I don't think they're going to necessarily be competing in the same way they were this year. And Luke Carney is actually a freshman who you could hold on to. Luke Carney is someone who next year, even as a sophomore, might think, hey, I'll sit behind Angeli and learn from Angeli and be able to develop and then have my starting role here. Collins is that weird middleman.
He's the odd man out.
He is.
He's the
and
placeholder.
He's always going to be that way.
It sucks to say that. I think if his performance over the first 2 games went differently, we wouldn't be saying that. But now we are. I don't think that there's really a world where Rickie Collins has much motivation to come back to Syracuse next year because why would he? And for all we're saying about, I mean, this is such a nuanced issue now in this era of college football. Listen, I feel bad for Rickie Collins, the person, and I started with that, and he's been through a lot. At the same time, I mean, kid's making a lot of money to be here and to come into these games.
About that today.
And I mean, it's more professional than it ever has been before. Yes, this is a college kid. Yes, this is a redshirt sophomore who's like 22, 21 years old. But he's also making a lot of money to perform. And the bottom line is he's not performing. And that's just what it is, right? I mean, you look at, and we're talking about Luke Carney, and that's a risk too. But you look at Collins and it's like, well, how much worse can it get? Against SMU, he was 22 of 45, 279 yards, 1 touchdown. He threw 3 interceptions, and he had like 3 other passes that could have been interceptions. We've seen that a lot. He's thrown 3 touchdowns against 5 interceptions and had a 55% completion rate. I mean, you look at that stuff, 3 touchdowns to 5 interceptions. Yeah, it's like you want to give the kid time to figure it out, but A, you don't have time, and B, how much worse could it get?
I mean, the turnovers was hard to watch. And that's the thing. It's funny because I feel like people talk about throwing in Luke Carney like that'd be such a big risk. But I don't know. In my mind, I'm kind of like, how big of a risk really is it? It's bad right now. They're losing right now. They're losing by a lot right now. And it's not competitive. You have to think even some of the wide receivers, the running backs are not feeling, people don't have like patience like they used to. And when people get discouraged, then you get grandfathers or not grandfathers
or
whoever that guy was, whether he's related to John Day Cook or not. If you guys are Syracuse fans, you know what I'm talking about.
To be determined.
You get them calling in and saying that they're going to yank their grandsons away. Just to give people some context, we don't know at this point whether it was actually a member of the family or not. Truly, we do not know. We heard differing reports. But it was just an interesting, fascinating situation where someone called into an ESPN Syracuse radio show claiming to be John Tay Cook's grandfather, saying that they watched the game against SMU and saying some bad things about Rickie Collins and how they were hoping for more for Jonte Cook. Again, it is not confirmed whether or not this was Jonte Cook's grandfather or not, but it was a very interesting phone call and a conversation that whoever this guy is, it made you think, is that how anyone else is feeling now that there's money and the NFL involved in a way that it didn't used to be? Honestly, this would be the kind of conversation where like Lawrence Moten would be like, this is BS. And maybe it is, but it's just an interesting thing to talk about, that idea of NIL.
But maybe it was BS 10 years ago and now it's not. And that's just the truth that nobody's wanted to warm up to yet. Listen, I think that Fran Brown, like I said, for the first time now, he has an on-the-field problem and he has an off-the-field problem, and he has an off-the-field problem with both his own team and the fans. Now you're starting to see whether or not that was a person related to Jonte Cook. That is the second, it's almost so ridiculous, the second receiver who now there's been discourse around. You might all remember a guy named Trevor Pena, who went to Penn State this offseason, who Fran Brown went on the record and said was partially because he was unsure of Rickie Collins. Jonte Cook, now this would be instance number 2. We also saw we saw a few things on that TV broadcast that were quite revealing, such as a clip that you were so kind to clip and show the world of offensive specialists, whatever, he's an offensive assistant, Josh Gaddis, reaming Collins out on the sidelines. That was not a pretty conversation for Rickie Collins. He did not want to discuss it post-game. You can watch it for yourself, and obviously the coaching staff was not too thrilled with him. Not only that, Travion Mack, the left tackle, the starting left tackle, he had an instance with Collins where he saw something, a wide open guy, should have been a touchdown. They got into it. Collins had to touch on that post-game. I mean, Fran Brown has to make a decision here. Like, you can't lose the team also, right?
Yeah.
Because you may have felt like now the fans are sort of feeling like what's left to play for, what does the rest of this season hold? If your own team starts feeling that way, things could get ugly real quick. Because no matter how much they buy into Fran, if the team's going out there every week and doesn't feel like they have a chance to win under Collins, they're not going to compete the way that they were.
I know. And that's a mental thing, but it's true. Listen, Fran Brown, you all know, if he decides to go with Rickie Collins, then the entire rest of the team will be forced to do as such.
Yeah.
And he will absolutely be expecting that they are giving their 100% effort. But damn, I mean, you have to think that some of these kids are getting frustrated because truly, I'm going to say it, SMU was not that good of a team. I understand they were in the college football playoff last year. This was not a college football playoff team. They played terrible at the end. Even down to this is the kind of thing that just rips your heart out. At the end of the game, Syracuse gets an interception. Rickie Collins trots out, and the very next play gives the ball right back. And then Syracuse still, on the next play after that, gets a safety. I mean, SMU was having a disaster of a situation happening at the end, and it still was too far away to come back, and it shouldn't have been at that point. And if he would have seen 1 or 2 more wide open players, because honestly, SMU's defense was having trouble, particularly in the backfield, it could have been a different game, and it could have been a game that they won. And honestly, under Steve Angeli, they would have won it. We could, if until the cows come home about Steve Angeli.
Yeah.
He is out for the season. But what do you do now? I mean, change doesn't happen unless change happens. You're basically looking at this decision. Luke Carney, who is definitely a big question mark, versus the hope that Rickie Collins gets better. You all know how I feel about hope, so I'm not going to go there. But
yeah, hope's not a strategy. It's
just
your favorite
not
saying. Well, there's also logistical issues, right? All right, with Carney. So here's another thing. There's so many pieces to this. With Carney, he's a true freshman. You going to burn his red shirt over this? I mean, you might have no choice, but you might have no choice. Yes, coaches, and we saw the whole thing with Kyle McCord and how that went when Ryan Day burned his red shirt. But I mean, this is almost a situation where it's out of necessity. And at that point, it's like you can't preserve a kid's red shirt over the well-being of your team in the second half of your season. I don't think, on the record, I don't think that Fran Brown is going to do it headed into Pittsburgh.
Same. I don't know, though.
I'm not sure if he does it. Maybe you do it heading into UNC the next week because UNC is obviously a bad team. That was a game that was really hyped up at the beginning of
the next week is Georgia Tech. It's Pitt, Georgia Tech, UNC.
Okay, so see, then you can't do it against Georgia Tech.
That's my point. It's now or never, girl.
Bad.
That's what makes it worse. It's like against UNC, you almost could kind of do anything because what the hell's happening at UNC?
No, right. UNC is down a dark road. But okay, so then that's what you said earlier. You can't throw Luke Carney out there for the first time against a ranked Georgia Tech team on the road. I mean, you can, and I hope he would succeed in that situation. But what are we setting the kid up for here? You
really can't. It really, to me, feels like, because honestly, I didn't even think about the red shirt. That's a very interesting point. But I don't think, let's just say that Fran Brown made that switch now. Not to speculate too much, but I think if I'm Luke Carney, I'm feeling good about that. I'm fine burning my red shirt because if I end up becoming the starter, help my team get back to a place where they go bowling, win a bowl game. Let's not act like... I'm just saying that.
What if Angeli comes back next year and then you're Luke Carney and you're back on the bench?
Yeah, it's possible, right? And then, but then maybe that becomes the red shirt year.
Yeah,
I don't really know. I think you would ultimately get it, or can you do that? I think you can do that, right?
Yes.
So ultimately, I think one way or another you get it back. I just think if I'm a freshman and I'm getting an opportunity to play, I want it, especially if it's the difference between my team losing and winning. And truly, still at this point, let's not act like it's impossible for them to get to a bowl victory. They could win against Pittsburgh, they could win against UNC, and they could win against Boston College, but that's pretty much it. So it is kind of now or never.
Yeah.
Yeah,
no, it's an interesting, and I don't envy the position that Fran and his staff are in right now because it's obviously a tough one. I mean, we won't know. We don't get any availability this week. Fran Brown doesn't talk. The players don't talk. Nothing until next week. We won't know what's been going on in practice these past 2 weeks. But I guess all I have left to say is there are 2 weeks here. You have an extra week to play with. If you're going to make the switch, you got the time now. And that's not something you're going to be able to say later on in the season. So I don't know. Fran Brown is at a really important juncture in sort of his coaching tenure here because everybody knows that Angeli's going to come back next year and you'll have, some guys now that are going to be another year older, another year. But that's just not good enough. Nobody wants to play meaningless football from the last week of September onwards. I mean, nobody wants to play. I'm saying second half, it would really be a meaningless last 2/3 of the season.
Yeah. Yep.
And we know Fran Brown's not a quitter and he doesn't like to throw in the towel like that. So we will see what his solution is. Will we see? I said that I don't think it'll be this week, and I don't because I think Fran Brown thinks that Collins deserves more than 2 games. So I think that's what will happen. But will we see the Carney switch before the end of the season? Feeling like we might.
Final thoughts, and then we'll get out of here.
Final thoughts is obviously leave in the comments what you think they should do. I mean, of course, everybody's up in arms now and wants this decision because they want change. But do you think it would be too hasty? Do you think it's putting Carney in a bad spot? Do you think they should burn his red shirt? What do you think? I mean, kid's got a ton of talent, came from Texas, won 4 state titles in high school. Big kid, certainly has the physical attributes, can move well. And the coaches have said that a few times. So if he can manage your offense better, what's stopping you?
I'm not saying do it. I'm not saying don't do it. But I'm saying if you are going to do it, now feels like an interesting and appropriate time, or perhaps before the UNC game. Beyond that, I'm not so sure what the point would be. Thanks so much, everyone, for joining us. Appreciate having you here. We'll see you back here next week.